Got to get out to Doc Pandya. It is time for Cleared to Play, where we take you inside the tent, get you updated on the latest injuries in the Bay. Proud to partner with UCSF Health on this segment and bring in Professor of Orthopedic Surgery, Dr. Nirav Pandya. Doc, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic. Certainly want to start off, at least from my standpoint, with Blake Snell and the comments that he made with regard to maybe being rushed back. Like, what is your take on that idea and the dangers associated with it?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the gray zone we get, particularly with professional athletes, where, from a medical standpoint, we know when an injury is quote unquote healed. You know when a bone is fused together. You know when a ligament or a muscle is healed. But then there's that second component of when can people actually functionally do what they need to do? When do they get that confidence back? And for a lot of athletes, they may be at the point where we say, look, it's been 6 weeks, things should be healed. But if they don't feel right, they don't feel like they're performing well, but there's not a physical reason why they can't be playing, that's where kind of that battle between athlete and medical staff and coaching staff can sometimes happen. But I do feel that, particularly for a pitcher, if they're not feeling right, even though they may be structurally healed, then you do worry, is this going to lead to a shoulder issue? Is this going to lead to an elbow issue? Because with pitchers, everything is so interconnected. So I think you definitely have to listen to the athlete, particularly with such a high-risk activity such as pitching.
Is the adductor one of the more difficult ones because it can feel like it's totally healed, but as you mentioned, with the dynamic motion of a pitcher, it can flare up even if you think you're 100%?
Yeah, absolutely, because you really can't stress that muscle unless you're going full speed. So there's only so much simulation you can do. There's only so much throwing, close to 95, 100 miles an hour you can do. So absolutely, that's kind of one of those weird things where you don't really know. It could be 4 weeks and you get out there and let's see how it feels. And particularly for that muscle, which doesn't have the best blood supply, it can go from feeling really good to feeling bad immediately pretty quickly. And you see that with Snell, who's had these kind of recurrent adductor injuries throughout his career.
Doc, we're literally watching the Giants interview people for tonight's starting pitcher on a daily basis. It's absurd with what's gone on. When a team suffers that many injuries, you often hear fans at a certain point go, gosh, is there something wrong with the training regimen? Is there something wrong with their process? Is there any validity to that idea?
I think with baseball, not as much. I think with everything is so regimented and so kind of set in stone with pitchers and how they warm up and how much they should be throwing. I think it's just one of those kind of rare things that's happening with the pitching staff this year. Now, if you go 5-10 years ago where pitchers are maybe being overused, where they're throwing 8-9 innings and doing it on 2-3 days rest, and you'd be worried about it. But I think there's been such a shift in how pitchers are used. I think this is more bad luck than it is anything to do with training or kind of how the Giants training staff is dealing with the players.
Lamont Wade Jr. back in Sacramento on a rehab start, dealing with a hamstring that he re-aggravated. How much should you be concerned about his workload when he comes back with a big club?
I think you definitely have to have a concern with it, particularly when it's a grade 2 hamstring. I mean, he's right at that 4 to 5 week mark. There's a high rate of re-injury with Major League Baseball players with these hamstring issues. So I think it's definitely something you want to slowly increase up the workload, but it could be tough. With the Giants' injury history this year, you never know who's going to be out, who's going to be thrown in to play more games. So something you definitely want to watch. And it's definitely a concern with that high rate of re-injury, particularly at the position he plays.
Doc Pandya cleared to play here, Willard and Dibs every week, 95.7 The Game. Doc, I don't know if you could put a number on this, but we were just batting this around, so would love you to weigh in. A team in the NBA whose core is largely in their mid-30s versus a core that's largely in their mid to late 20s, how much more likely is that team in its 30s to have injury problems?
Yeah, there's been actually one study that's kind of looked at this and tried to quantify it, and it's about 3% increase per year of experience in the NBA. So you're looking at, you say there's a 10-year difference between, people in their 20s versus the 30s, you're probably looking at a 25-30% increased rate of injury for a team in their mid-30s, which obviously is very pertinent for the Warriors in terms of who they're going to bring in as a free agent or a trade.
When you look at Paul George and his myriad of injuries throughout the course of his career, is it fair to say he's injury-prone, or has he just been afflicted by a couple of catastrophic ones?
I think that obviously everyone remembers the tibia where the bone came out through the skin, which was, one of the more, brutal injuries you'll ever see. And he recovered, very well from that. I think the more concerning thing is, he's had shoulder surgeries on both his shoulders. He's had a knee surgery. He had a UCL injury, which you don't see in on basketball players that much. And I think the concerning thing is when you look at his 14-year career, he's only played 70 games in half of those seasons. And in the past 5 seasons, he's only done that once. So as a 34-year-old, that definitely is a warning sign for a player that, besides that tibia hasn't had a catastrophic injury. You see these kind of small injuries piling up. So that's where we get a little bit worried about his longevity, particularly when you look at his track record over the past 5 years.
If I threw 4 names at you, you tell me, do any of them stand out as bigger injury risks than the others? If I said Klay Thompson, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, and Kevin Durant, all have significant ones. Any difference?
I would say Jimmy Butler is probably the most concerning. And it's interesting. He's probably the one that hasn't had one major injury except for a meniscus injury. But if you look at his career, he averages 50 to 60 games over the past few seasons. He's only played 70 games once in his entire 13-year career. So that's where you worry about, quote unquote, someone who's injury prone or more likely to miss games. I think Pat Riley even said he was concerned about Jimmy Butler's availability. Butler, of those players, I'm the most concerned about. And interestingly enough, the player I'd be least concerned about is Klay Thompson. After coming off those 2 major injuries, he hasn't missed much time. And before that, he hadn't missed much time. So I think he, of all people, is probably the least concerning from an injury perspective.
Doc, one more from me, fresh off your trip to the Cinque Terre. Bigger injury, sunburn or injury to your wallet?
Injury to the wallet. Definitely injury to the wallet. I'll take the sunburn any day. Italy's expensive. Man, it's not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful though. The pictures were worth $1,000.
That hurt, Doc. I'm not kidding. Like just yesterday, the lovely Christy and I were talking about planning something to Italy, and I literally said to her, I go, I don't know when we can go. I got to save up the money. And then you just said what you said, and I think we added 3 more years to the plan.
Yeah, this is a 5 to 10 year plan, so definitely need to save up the money, but definitely worth it.
Damn it,
Doc, I love it.
All right, Doc, great to talk to you. Thank you, sir.
All right, take care, guys.
All right, proceeding was sponsored by UCSF.